All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're really starting our journey into Mandarin Chinese. And we're going to begin not just by learning words, but by trying to understand a whole new way of thinking. Our focus today will be on 4 phrases that are absolutely essential. They're what I call the foundational pillars of daily communication. And trust me, these aren't just vocabulary words. They are the very supports for every single conversation you're going to have. So I want you to keep this question in mind as we go through our lecture today. What if a simple greeting, something as basic as hello, could actually unlock the values of an entire culture? This is the kind of analytical mindset I want you to have. Every word, every tone, every single character we look at is like a cultural artifact, and it contains stories about history, philosophy, and society. So here's our game plan for today. We'll start by defining what I call the 4 pillars of conversation. Then we're going to do a really detailed deconstruction of the standard greeting. After that, we'll dive into the 2 core expressions of politeness, and finally, the farewell. We'll wrap it all up by putting these pieces together to see the bigger cultural picture they reveal. Okay, let's start with these 4 pillars. The phrases for hello, thank you, sorry, and goodbye. I mean, they're the bedrock of daily interaction in any language, right? But in Mandarin, they carry a very specific cultural weight. I want you to think of them like the 4 main pillars holding up a house. If you don't have a firm grasp of how to use them, and I'm not just talking about their meaning, but their context, any conversation you try to build is just going to feel wobbly. Mastering them is your first step to showing you understand the fundamentals of social engagement. So let's start our deconstruction with the first pillar, ni hao. Now, this is probably the most recognized Mandarin phrase on the planet, but as we're about to see, there's a surprising amount of depth packed into these 2 simple syllables that most casual learners completely miss. All right, let's try to say this one together. I'll say it first, and I really want you to listen to the shape, the contour of my voice. Ni hao. Listen again. Ni hao. Do you hear how the pitch kind of dips down and then comes back up? The #1 mistake English speakers make is saying it flat, monotonic, like ni hao. See, in a tonal language like Mandarin, if you strip away the tones, you're not just sounding like a foreigner, you might actually be changing the meaning of the word entirely. So let's try it again, really focus on that dip and rise movement. Ni hao. Now, phonologically, what's so interesting here is the tone. Both of these characters technically have the 3rd tone, which is that falling, rising pitch. I want you to literally take your finger and draw a check mark in the air. Down, then up. That is the shape your voice should make. Hao. But, and this is a big but, there's a rule in spoken Mandarin called tone sandhi. It's a game changer. When you have 2 third tones right next to each other, the first one actually changes to a 2nd tone, a rising tone. It just makes it flow better. So even though it's written as ni hao with 2 third tones, it's actually spoken as ni hao. Getting this rule down is absolutely crucial for sounding natural. And this is where things get really fascinating. The genius of the Chinese writing system is that the characters themselves tell a story. Let's break it down. The character for you, ni, N-I-I, is made of 2 parts, or radicals. On the left, you've got the person radical, e. On the right is r, which is an old way of writing you. Now look at hao, H-A-O. This is a compound ideograph. It combines the character for woman, nu, with the character for child, si. Think about that. The ancient people who created this language saw a mother with her child as the ultimate symbol of goodness. It's a concept that's deeply rooted in Confucian ideas about family and harmony. So when you say ni hao, you're not just saying hello. You are literally saying you good. It's a simple but really profound wish for the other person's well-being. Okay, and this brings us to a super important point about how you use language in different social situations. In a formal setting, like you're in a business meeting or you're meeting an elder for the first time, ni hao is absolutely the correct, respectful thing to say. But, and this is a big one, if you use ni hao with a close friend or a family member, it can feel, well, awkward. It's too formal. It creates this weird distance, signaling that you're not really close. In those situations, you're way more likely to just use their name, or a really common informal greeting like "你吃饭了吗?" which literally means "have you eaten?" but it functions just like "how are you?" Understanding this difference is what separates a textbook learner from someone who can actually navigate social situations. All right, let's move on to our next 2 pillars. These form the very core of social etiquette. We're going to look at thank you and sorry together because the way they're used, how often they're used, and the cultural weight they carry, it all provides this really fascinating contrast and a deep insight into Chinese social dynamics.
Okay, first, let's nail the pronunciation of 谢谢. The first syllable is a sharp, falling fourth tone. Think of a decisive downward chop with your voice. 谢. The second syllable is what we call a neutral tone. That means it's unstressed, it's short, it's light, so it flows 谢谢. A very common mistake is to give both syllables the same heavy stress, 谢谢, which just sounds robotic. You want that flow from strong to light, 谢谢.
Now for the apology. Listen carefully to the tones here. 对不起. This is a heavy one, folks. It carries a ton of weight, and its literal meaning tells you exactly why. 对 means to face, 不 means not, and 起 means to rise. So if you translate it literally, it means I cannot face you. It implies this deep sense of shame, like you've done something so wrong that you've lost face and you can't even look the other person in the eye. It's an incredibly powerful thing to say. Now, this comparison is vital for anyone who's going to be in a Chinese-speaking environment. While 谢谢 is used all the time, just like thank you in English, it actually creates a social obligation for a response. You have to say something back. The standard reply is bukachi, which means something like don't be so polite or you're welcome. Just staying silent can come off as really dismissive. On the other hand, 对不起 is reserved for serious problems. You would never use it if you say accidentally bumped into someone on the subway. For minor stuff like that, you'd use 不好意思, which is more like excuse me or my bad. Using a heavyweight apology like 对不起 for a small thing can actually make the situation more awkward because you're implying a level of wrongdoing that just doesn't fit.
And now for our final pillar, the farewell. Just like hello, the Chinese word for goodbye isn't a simple direct translation. It actually carries a very specific and I think quite beautiful philosophical outlook.
First things first, let's get the sound right. 再见. Notice how both characters have that strong, falling fourth tone. It's very decisive and clear. 再见. Feel that sharp downward motion in your voice? 再见. Okay, now that we have the sound, let's pull apart the characters to really understand what this farewell means. The logic here is it's beautifully transparent. The character 在 means again or once more, and the character 见 means to see or to meet. So when you put them together and say 再见, you aren't really saying goodbye in the English sense. You're making a very literal statement. Again, see, or more naturally, see you again.
And this, right here, reveals a major cultural perspective. The very structure of the standard farewell has optimism built right into it. It's not an ending, it's an expression of hope, and maybe more importantly, an expectation that you will meet again. The English goodbye, which comes from God be with you, has a sense of finality to it, but 再见 reflects a worldview where relationships, or 关系, are seen as continuous, as cyclical. This parting is just temporary. The default assumption is, of course we'll see each other again.
So let's step back for a second and look at what we've done here. We've analyzed just 4 basic expressions, but in the process, we've unlocked these fundamental ideas about respect, about social duty, about the cyclical nature of relationships, and even a bit of philosophy that's embedded right there in the language itself. And if you remember only one thing from today's lecture, let it be this. Real fluency in a language isn't just about memorizing vocabulary lists and grammar rules. It's about understanding the why behind the words. Why is how made of woman and child? Why does 对不起 carry so much moral weight? Why is 再见 so hopeful? The answers to those questions, that's the bridge from simple translation to genuine cross-cultural understanding. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. We've spent this whole lecture analyzing just 4 phrases, and we've uncovered all these layers of cultural and historical meaning. So just imagine the stories, the philosophical debates, and the unique perspectives that are just waiting for you in the thousands of other characters and expressions in this incredible language. What we've done today, this is only just the beginning.